don't go to sleep. I've
No,
never
not
had
at
my
all.
very own techie
I'm good.
before, so I'm going to hang on to this. Am I still going to advance?
You can try it, and then we'll just go
I'm-
from there.
I'm sure it will.
Here.
It will. You're good. Okay, thank you. Let's call this Amelia Earhart's most excellent adventure. But it makes you wonder what a little freckle-faced girl from Kansas is doing on a deserted South Pacific island. But then on the same token, you might wonder what a housewife from Longview, how she wound up there also looking for Amelia Earhart's airplane. So actually, Amelia and I have a lot in common that you may not be aware of, and that is when we were little girls, we were both tomboys, and we both wore pigtails, the same kind of pigtails that come down and loop up and they're tied with a bow. But tomboys to the core. So, and we both wound up in aviation, although Amelia's very famous. She learned to fly in the early days of aviation when they were basically flying by the seat of their pants, except for navigation. And navigation was very, very basic, with no GPS, of course. So they had to plot it out and find a heading and keep correcting. And it was a difficult time for flying, but they did it like nobody's business. So she was a lot of different things. She was a feminist, which is something else we had in common. She was a businesswoman. She was a college professor at Purdue for a while. She was a nurse. She was trained to be a nurse. She was an author and an air racer, but she was always looking for a way to make aviation pay its way, to make her a living. So she set many records for distance and for altitude, and to be the first person, for example, to do something like she was the first person to fly from Mexico City to New York City. We have all kinds of records like that. And to fly from, first person to fly from Honolulu to California. So just different things like that. But her big break came in 1928. She was invited to ride along on a flight to cross the Atlantic. It was going to be called the Friendship Flight. And this was a year after Charles Lindbergh had been the first person to cross the Atlantic. And, you know, he was met in Paris, thousands of people, and just changed the world. So a year later, she was just inadvertently asked, they were looking for a woman to fly on this flight. So they wouldn't let her touch the controls. She had to sit in the back and just do the logs. But when they got to Europe and they started getting out of the plane, the crowds were there for Amelia. They didn't care who was flying that airplane. The men, you know, the men are just standing back, but everybody was wanting Amelia. So she really brought women into the race. And several years later, Lindbergh, that friendship flight to Europe, where she was like a sack of potatoes, really put the fire in her heart and made her want to become the kind of world-class pilot that could do flights like that. And so she started working on her skills, and several years later, she married George Putnam Palmer, and he was one who had named her to go on the friendship flight. So they got married. He's a big promoter. So he's promoting her to fly herself from the United States to Europe. So she goes off on this flight, and it was, Lindbergh went in 27 and she went in 32. So this is 5 years later. But no one else had done it in the meantime, although many had tried, but failed, and several died in the attempt. So she tried and made it. So she was not only the first female to cross the Atlantic, she was the second person in the world to do it. And everything always advanced aviation when they did that. So she and George are married, and he's promoting her, and they're figuring out how to make a living out of flying. And they get the idea that they want to do this world flight. And she wanted to be the first person, not the first woman, but the first person to fly around the world at its widest point, which is the equator. Now, if we could get that world flight
Yes,
up.
ma'am.
My techie.
Okay, so
Make this
which one is
happen.
the world?
That's not it. Oh, that's not it.
This?
There it is. Can you full screen that?
I can do anything.
Wow, okay. So anyway, here she is in Oakland, California. Let me get my little pointer out. Oakland, California, and everything for this flight, it's not like planning a trip from here to Texarkana or something, you know, that's easy. But when you're going around the world, you have to consider world weather. And as you know, all of our weather comes out of Africa. You know, all our hurricanes come across here and hit the United States. So that's her main concern. She starts in Oakland and is going west to Honolulu, which is right here. And that way, this is in the spring of '37. So that way, she can get around the world and get through Africa before the hurricane season starts. So that's the way she misses the weather. But when they got to Honolulu, as they were taking off, she ground looped the airplane. It was super heavy with all the extra fuel they had, and it kind of turned sideways, and the landing gear collapsed, and it skidded around, and so it was not flyable. So they had to ship it back to California to fix it, and this is going to take several months. So now they can't get around the world before hurricane season, so she changes, and now she's going to fly from Oakland to the east and go around this way. So in that way she can get through Africa before the hurricane season, and then she can finish the loop around the rest of the world. So that's what happened. And so she made some changes to the airplane. You can see right here her little flight across the United States down here to Florida. So she's checking out the plane after it's been repaired and making some changes, and they were always concerned about weight because they have to carry so much fuel. So she's taking off everything that they don't need, and she took off the trailing antenna in Florida. Now why, we don't know, except that it was heavy. It was something that after they got in flight, they could let it out and it could trail out. Don't go to sleep over here. You're my techie. Don't let her go to sleep. So the trailing antenna, they get better reception. So she's always thinking about crossing the Pacific because that's the big leg. So let's go back to, no wait, just a minute. Just a minute, okay. She made her way, okay, we've got Oakland and Miami, come down here to South America, and then crossed up to Africa and came across this way. And so we pick up over here, and she comes down, here's Australia, up right here to Lae, New Guinea. And what she's headed for is she, of course, wants to get from Lae to Honolulu and then back to the States, but she has, here is Howland Island right there, and she has shipped all this fuel and oil there, so she's going to stop there, refuel and everything, and then go on to Honolulu, and then it's just a short jump home. So there they are in Lae, New Guinea. And okay, let me think what we need to look at here. Okay. First of all, let me just tell you, we know that she left Lae, New Guinea and never made it to Howland Island. She disappeared somewhere in there. And so the question was where, of course they called the Navy out, the biggest search in the history of the Navy. But there were some things about that too, that the Navy was in Honolulu, all based there, and it took them a week to get out there where they think she went down. And of course everybody thinks that she ran out of fuel finally and just crashed into the ocean. So they're cruising out there, and they've got all these dignitaries on board. They were doing some kind of tour in Honolulu. So it may have been the greatest search in the history, we don't know. But we do know that they had an aircraft carrier out there, and they had these little bi-wing airplanes that could go off of the carrier. This is in 37. And one of the airplanes flew over the little island. You see, there's Howland where she was going, and then right down here is Gardner Island. Now that is now called Nicomaroro, which is a little hard to say, so I'm going to call it Niku. So if you hear me say Niku, I'm talking about that little island. And one of the little airplanes flew over that island and circled the island and reported that he saw signs of recent habitation, but no one came out to greet him, so that was the end of that. And the thing is, they had been down for a week, and if they made it to land, there's no fresh water out there anywhere. And so they were probably sick, they had no food, and they were in the shade, and the little airplane comes over, and too sick to go over, run out on the beach. Of course, I think I would have found enough coconuts or something to write SOS on the beach, but that didn't happen. But anyway, they were in the area searching, and of course, after a while, they have to just give up. So the mystery went on, and there were all these theories that she was a spy because she was a good friend of the Roosevelts, so she was out there in the Marshall Islands, which is right out in the area somewhere. She was spying, and one theory was that she was captured by the Japanese, and we had a guy who had proof that she was executed and buried on this island. And just all these theories, but no one had any tangible proof. Even the man who had a witness who saw her be shot and fell into this grave, when they dig that up, they found a little piece of material, and that was all. And you know, that's not proof that Amelia Earhart was killed there. So there's never been any proof. So it just kind of floundered along for years and years and decades. And then in the mid-80s, this up here, this tiger, this it stands for, it's an acronym, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. And they went out to look for airplanes that through the years have been lost, historical airplanes. And so they had a couple of guys get in touch with them and said they had been studying the logs for the radio calls. And they had some very interesting things they wanted to show. So they met with Rick, who was the executive director. And first of all, they were showing from the logs that Amelia Earhart used the radio on her airplane for 3 days after she supposedly was down. Everybody thought she crashed into the water. But in order to do that, her starboard engine had to be above the water to start the engine to run the radio so she could make the calls. And they did have one of those slides. I'm afraid to look for it. Let me show you. Let's go back and get one of those little slides.
Can I close this?
Yes. The one with the little, I can't see, not that one. This one, that one right there. Okay. But it's, okay, it's number 00, that's it. Okay. I know that's hard to see, but those little raised bars just show every time she made a call, there's a little bar, and so they have those. You can see that. Here is July the 2nd, here's July the 3rd, and here's July the 4th. So you can see all the calls that were made.
What year was that?
1937. So if she had crashed into the ocean, she couldn't be making these phone calls, so they knew she was down on land somewhere. Okay. Then the second thing is, there's another one. This one. Okay. This is good enough. That's fine, just like that. There's equipment called direction finding, and it comes out on a radio wave. And as long as you steer the plane onto that radio wave, you can go where it's directing you. And so that's how she was going to find Howland Island. There was Coast Guard cutters sitting offshore, and she was supposed to be in contact with them, but she had lost contact. They could hear her, but she couldn't receive them. So they were going to send her a direction finding signal so she could come right into Howland Island. But of course, they're sending it and she's not getting it. But these are some, after the airplane was down, this is Wake Island. And I think that's Midway, and this is Honolulu. And even down here on Howland Island, they're all, when she would broadcast on the radio, those 3 days she was down, they would throw direction finding signals there. And they all converged right here, and that's right where Gardner Island is, which is where Niku. So that's another reason why I was leading them there. Okay, so let's just go back to the slideshow. Let's start the slideshow, and I can do that from here if you want to. If you can make it. Okay. So, as I've told you, TIGER stands for the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. Anything you want to know about this project is on this website right here. Whoops. Oh, that was a laser and that was the wrong. This tiger.org, there's just mountains and mountains of information, and it really is interesting. So, we take off. I got to go on this trip. I was not qualified to go on this trip, as a matter of fact, because to go on an expedition with Tiger, you had to have gone on a training mission to some other airplane and work on it to learn how to do aviation archaeology. And I had not done that. It was like $2,500, and I always wanted to, but I never did. So I was following this, and they were coming up short of money for their expedition. So they put out a call and said they were looking for sponsors, and a sponsor of a certain amount would get to go, if they chose to, with the team on the expedition. So I talked to Ron about it, and he said, honey, if you want to do that, that's just fine. So off I went. So that's how I got to go on this expedition. I was kind of separate from the rest of the team, though, because this was kind of last-minute stuff. And we're going to Fiji to meet, and that's where the boat is going to pick us up, to take us to the island. And so I decided, well, I might as well go a week early, because I'm a scuba diver, and they've got coral all over the place there. So this is the international terminal at Suva, Fiji, which is, by the way, not one island, it's 300 islands. So got on this puddle jumper and flew up to one of the islands called Taveuni, and this is their arrival terminal here. And they picked us up, and we went to the resort, which was very nice, and it was very internationally oriented in that at night when you went in for a meal, they'd have big tables, and you just all sat around a big table, and you met people from just all over the world there. We had a really good time. And a group of us got together and rented well, of course we went diving, and you can see how beautiful it is, how many fish there are, and this barrel sponge here is big enough for a person to get into. And it's just amazing. It's a whole other world. And Fiji was beautiful, except that there's so many islands that the current goes through there really fast. And we went out on one, and they dropped us off on this cliff. You know, here's the island, and then it just dropped down like that. So you have to watch your own depth. You can't go below a certain depth. And so but the water, the current was so fast that I was just tumbling head over heels, just rolling along there. So to the dive guard, I do this, you know, and so I left the group and went up. Of course, they were all tumbling too, but I guess they were into that. And anyway, the boat wouldn't even come close to pick me up because the current was so bad. So they came by and threw an inner tube on a rope and let it come up to me and pulled me away from the fast current, and then got me on the boat. So I was grateful for that. But anyway, a group of us got a van and we decided to go see the island. It's just beyond belief. It's so beautiful. Waterfall, the big cave behind it. And 1999, you remember that? Here's the international date line right there, goes right through Taveuni. And we thought the world was going to come to an end and all the computers were going to crash. So it was kind of exciting to be right there. That's where the every day starts, right there. So that was fun. See what a beautiful view. So we get finally, it's time to meet the team. So I go down to the pier and find the Tiger ship. And here's part of the crew. And of course, here I am over here. I'm thinking this is going to be a 5-day cruise to this little island. We're just going to lounge around and read books and have fun. So here's the boat that we were on, and you can see the little holes here. That's where our staterooms were. So since there were only 2 women on the team, and one of them was very special. She was a forensic anthropologist. And so she got a room to herself, and since I was the only other female, I got a room for myself. And so it was really nice to have the privacy and have my own shower and everything. And this deck right here, that's where the salon and the kitchen is, and then up on top, of course, is the captain and the crew. And so we're down here on the bottom. But anyway, it was an amazing boat. Mostly does diving trips and things like that. Had their own water maker, which acted up, didn't work for a while. We had to really not wash our clothes because we wore the same thing day after day on the island, so that was a little problem, but we got by with that. The mast was not seating correctly, so they couldn't hoist the sails. So we just had to motor through the ocean. And so this is what Fiji looked like the night we left. We left about dusk and off we went, but in the middle of the night the waves picked up. It started getting rough, and although it wasn't this bad, that's what it felt like. And although this was not our boat, I found one. This is what we were doing, because in my bunk was about 3 feet off the floor, and down here at the end was a porthole, and you're looking into the water at one time, and then you're looking at the clouds, and then it's the water. And so it was just a matter of time before the boat turned over. We were all terrified, and I was one of the few that didn't get sick. Everybody on that boat was just sick and green, but it never bothered me. But we had to stay in our beds a lot. But this is, I had my diving gear with me. See, that was so great. So this is the buoyancy compensator, which you can put more air in it. It becomes like a life jacket. So I had that and my snorkel mask, and I had my fins. And so at night, I'd lay them out on the floor by the bed so that when, not if, but when the boat rolled over, I'd be able to grab that, because I felt like it would give me a chance to survive out there in the ocean. And then put myself to sleep by thinking about how I was going to get out of the boat, because if it's dark and you can't see, you know, I wanted it in my mind where to go. And normally you go out of the cabin and up the stairs to the salon. But if the boat's upside down, now you have to go out and you swim down the stairs and out of the boat and up. So, you know, I was trying to get it in my mind, and so that I could survive that. But finally, after 5 days, everything just smoothed out, and this is dusk, and we're coming up on Nico, and here it is right here. So we're just going to wait, and we'll go in the morning. So, and I was the, well, let's just go. This is a picture of Nico Mororo from the air, and it's a mile across this way and about 3.5 miles long. And this shelf around here, this is a coral ledge, which is very common for all islands out there in the South Pacific. They're all built, it's a big lava like a volcano, and then the coral has built on top of that, and then there's the brush like this is. But this is a true atoll. You see, it's a circular island with the lagoon in the middle. And you'll see this a lot. This is the opening to the lagoon. And this right here is an old British freighter that ran into the reef about 8 years before Amelia Earhart was out there. And so that's a landmark. And we're going to be right out here. But to get onto the island, we have to go around this way to a place over here where they dynamited a channel to get through that coral ledge to the land. And then we have to come through this jungle here, and then we have a little skivvy. They're gonna walk it up there, and they'll take us across, and this is where we're gonna be working, is over here. So that's what the island looks like. And this is from the ship looking in. You can see where the light blue water is. That's kind of a high tide over the coral shelf. And this is more or less at low tide. You can see the shelf there, and you see all these big boulders there. That's how bad the storms come through there, the cyclones and things. And these are just chunks off the ocean floor that they've just tossed up there. So there's a lot of stuff going on because the cyclones just washed through there. And here's this was called the Norwich City, which is very important because when Amelia Earhart was making her radio calls, they couldn't hear very well, and they thought she was saying New York City. But if she was where we think she was, she would have been able to see the ship, and it would have said on the side Norwich City, and that's probably what she was saying. So they're in our little rubber ducky. They go up there and tie onto that ship so we don't drift off too much. And here are the little rubber duckies. I was the quartermaster, and my job was to see that all the equipment was in working order and had fresh batteries, and everything was copacetic. So the crew went out at first with most of the equipment, and this is that little pathway into the island I was talking about. And here, this is me in the orange shirt right here. This is January in this calendar. This is the second time I've been a calendar girl. I was so excited about that. But they'd come in and put all the equipment on the beach, and then they'd start ferrying people in, and we'd get out of the boats and we'd just grab whatever was there and go on through the jungle. But the thing was, there's a couple of the guys and all our stuff just everywhere. A storm that had come through had left all this trash. These are all coconuts, these are all palm fronds that are down. You can see you can't walk over that. You'll just turn your ankle. And you can also see here how the sand has washed through there. So you don't know if whatever was there, when we were there, it was about, let me see, we were there in 99 and 37, that's 60-something years. So there have been so many storms through there, you never know where the surface was at the time that they were there, so it made it really hard to find things. This is a stone crab about about this big around, real thick shell and big claws like that, which didn't interest us. We didn't have any of them, but the crew was catching them, coming and going, because they were cleaning them and putting them in the freezer for their next crew. And that's the only animals that were on the island were crabs and spiders and some wild chickens that the British left there at one time running around. No birds, that's all that was there. So I learned to carry a stick in front of me because I don't like these little fellas. You know, if you get a spider web all over your face, you'd be running screaming through the jungle. So there's Van heading out toward the island. Now when Tiger was there just 4 or 5 years before, and this is an old settlement that the British had had. They had had a coconut plantation. These buildings were all in good shape, but you can see now that they were just demolished. That's how bad the weather had been. So here's the little trail. We took almost a whole day to clear a trail enough so that we could get through this jungle, which was at least a half or 3/4 of a mile through there. And there the guys carrying stuff through. It was beautiful. And these buca trees, how fascinating. Just a beautiful place. When we get to the other side, now we're on the shore of the lagoon, and this is a palm tree that is still rooted, but it's fallen over and it's out over the water, and so it casts a shadow in the water. You can see the shadow. And we saw these little things, and you can see what it is. It's sharks, and this one was about 2 feet long, and there must have been hundreds or thousands of little sharks about this long. It was like a huge nursery, and they must have liked this shade of the tree because it was cooler. And this one is a little larger, but you can see the black tips on its fins. That means stay away. You don't want to mess with the sharks on this island, because it's not like if you've been out fishing in the Gulf or something, you see sharks. Those are nurse sharks. They're not man-eaters like these are, so we couldn't get in the water and swim or anything. So here we are. We have our little rubber ducky. We're going across to the other side where we're going to work. And here's some of our metal detectors. Thank you. Yeah. So it's getting exciting now. Let me back up just a minute, because our expedition was called 4P, and P stood for preliminary, and it was actually a secret mission. Yeah, because when they had been there 4 or 5 years before, they had been headed back to Fiji, and a storm hit them, and they went into this other island, and they talked to a woman there who said she grew up on this island, Niku. And the reason we were out here was because they had gotten what's an overhead photograph? Area? Yeah, well anyway, Australia had one showing this island, and they found a little cruciform shape on it, and it was like not natural because it had even edges, you know. So that, coupled with the fact that this woman said she grew up on this island, there was an airplane there that they used to play on. So that was the secret mission. It was no longer we're going to go look for something, but it's that we're going to this airplane, and we've got to figure out what to do to be able to keep it safe until we can get the equipment out there to pick it up and take it home, because the pirates will come in. You know, when word gets out that you found something, they'll come in and just grab it all. So that was our mission. So we're so excited. We get here to the area where we're going to go look, and we're going to go find this airplane. But the first thing you have to do is, we had on our little water shoes while we were working and everything. Now we have to put on our Doc Martin boots, which I just had a real problem with. They're real heavy, and I think I wore 2 pair of socks, and had waterproof Band-Aids. But you have to, though, take a dry towel. You have to get all the sand off. You can't have any sand in your socks or it'll create a blister, and then you're really in trouble. You can get an infection. And we don't even have radio contact out here. We're so far from Fiji. So, you know, we're just on our own out here. So we all sat down. You have to dry your feet real well and get everything going. And we're getting ready to work. Whew, after all this. And you can see the beach though. These are just chunks of coral. It's really hard to work on. And here the guys that are so thrilled with themselves. They built a little lean-to to put our stuff under in case it rains, and they were just so proud of themselves. So, and here's what we were dealing with. And this is just a view looking out to the shipwreck, and then there's our boat, the Naya. And this is not in chronological order, but we did use the metal detectors quite a bit and found several little things, but some which were important, some which weren't. And here's Russ with the surveying equipment that, first of all, we just marched straight out into the jungle where this airplane was supposed to be, and there was just nothing there. Nothing. I don't know what that was a picture of, but it wasn't an airplane in the jungle. And something would be there, you know, the wheels or the gear or something would be there. So our whole mission is scrubbed. And so we get together and decide that we'll just take the opportunity and search the territory here that hadn't been searched before. So that's what he's doing with this. We were you can see the pink ribbon, and we did 20-meter squares and blocked it off with the pink tape so that we'd go in there and we would look over every inch of it and record it on a little thing if we found anything. And you can see how hard it is to find anything. Can you see this right here? That black rock looking thing? That's a headstone.
Oh.
There's a grave there. And you know, we would have just walked right by it, but we were just searching every little inch. And you can see how much the ground has filled in around it in the 60 years that since anyone was there. And this is the way the scrub looks. It's really hard getting through there. This is a representative of the Kiribati Nation, which owns this island. Ron and I were talking about that on the way up here today. He went with us to oversee everything, make sure everything was done according to Hoyle. And as a matter of fact, we did excavate a grave, and Karen, our forensic anthropologist, oversaw that. But come to find out, it was the bones of a baby. Now, why they buried the baby over there on that side of the island, we have no idea. But anyway. That was part of it, and he was there to see that everything was done properly. And since then, several expeditions after that, the Kiribati Nation gave Tiger sole ownership of exploring that island and anything we found there that we could have. So nobody else can go out there but Tiger, which I'm real glad, because they do everything real well. This was an earlier expedition, and this is Rick Gillespie, and he's looking at this metal thing that they think is a bookcase that came out of an airplane. And you can see the rivet holes. So, and they had a photograph after they brought it home and it was being analyzed and everything. A photograph looking into Amelia's airplane, and sure enough, there is a metal bookcase right there. But these holes didn't line up, and it just wasn't. It was the metal was the right date. They could tell by the thickness that it was manufactured in the 30s, but they could never prove that that was part of her airplane. And there's me and this became my expedition outfit. I've got it right here. It took 2 or 3 days to finally find the right outfit that works, but because of all the, when you're going through the brush, you've got to have long sleeves, long pants, but I still had the pants where the legs zipped off, so you could take them off, cool off, and I had a bikini under there. And Sandra told me the other day, she said, I saw a picture of you in that bikini, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, no, you did not see a picture of me in that bikini. Because I had one on under my clothes, but I have a thyroid condition. So the doctor said, don't overheat. Well, you know, it's the middle of July and you're 280 miles from the equator, and when you're out on the beach, there's a little breeze, but you step 1 foot into the brush and there's no breeze. I mean, it's a killer. So I would, when we take a lunch break, I would go to the edge of the water and I'd try to get away from the guys and take my clothes off so I'd get in my bikini in the edge of the water, and I didn't want to get out deep because of the sharks, but I was able to cool down enough, cool my core down enough to where I felt like I was okay out there. And there's the famous hat. There's a long story behind this, and I won't bore you with it, but that's a jaguar on there, but we called it a tiger because this was a tiger expedition. I have my Amelia Earhart pin on there. And so this is just, we worked in the jungle quite a bit, and we looked and everything, but at night when we'd come back to the ship, we of course slept on the ship. And this is Gary Quigg, and it was his birthday. We're in the salon, and this is his birthday cake, and it has an airplane crashed into it. So, and here's half of the team right here. You see, none of us were spring chickens. I was 58. I was in the best physical shape I've ever been in. But you can see, I'm one of the younger ones there. I hope you can see that. But anyway, every night when we come in, everyone had to fill out their report and fill in all these blanks and tell what you did and what you found, or if you didn't, blah, blah. And we'd come in for a debriefing, and this is Rick and a picture of the island. So he would debrief everybody, you know, to make sure we were getting everything out of this. And there's John, he's working on his report, and I found this Amelia Earhart mystery puzzle. So I started trying to put it together. But you can see down here, that's sunburn on the leg, and so obviously I had my water shoes and shorts on, and I burned my ankles and the front of my legs. So I had to sleep with my feet elevated about a foot or so at night, so the swelling would go down enough to get my boots back on in the morning to go back out on the island. So after all of that, we came up with Plan B, which was machetes. And so we went back to the jungle, and we lined up on the beach that I showed you where we were going to work. We landed up kind of on the beach, facing inward, about 10 feet apart, so we could all start going in, and you've got about 5 feet on either side that you're responsible for, you know, searching as you go. And some of it, there he is, I don't know if you can see that, there he is with his machete. And some of it was a little open, but most of it looked like this. This is Scavola, and the island is covered with it. And you can't crawl through it, and there's no way around it. The only way is to cut through it. And this is our ship's doctor right here, just a cool little shot. She was such a sweet thing. And so that's how I got my legs sunburned, right there. And one of the crew members cutting coconuts. These are all coconut palms. And like I say, they had another cruise coming, so every night they'd sit and they'd clean and grate coconut. Had a big chest freezer, so they'd put it in there for their next cruise. And one of their traditions is entertaining us. And so they sang and they played instruments. There's a long pipe thing. And they made this drink called kava, which is horrible. And it numbs your tongue, but it's extremely rude for you to refuse to have some. So they passed the bowl around, and in these days of COVID, we would never do this, but everybody was drinking out of the same bowl, you know. So we all had some kava, and they sang and danced for us. This is Ron, I can't remember his last name, but he was a retired American Airlines captain, and while he was on Fiji, he found this long blue skirt with the applique on it like this. He thought that was the cutest thing he had ever seen in his life. So every night when we came in, we took our showers and went into dinner. There was Ron with his long skirt on. What a great group of guys, though. This was really a neat deal. This is Van Hun from Fort Worth, and he decided to write a letter and put it in a bottle, and he's going to throw it out to sea. And so there it goes, and sure enough, it was 3 years later. It washed up on the shore of Lae, New Guinea, where Amelia took off on that last leg. And so they corresponded with him. He was really thrilled about that. And there's our group. So I guess my tale is told. There is something I'd like to read you about Amelia Earhart, and I will ask if there are any questions, but I think I've kind of used up all my time.
Did you bring your machete?
I have my machete, it's right here. Janice said, don't go without your machete. And the thing about the machete is it's very heavy, but after 2 days before we left, I developed tennis elbow, and I couldn't even pick up a glass of water with that arm. It took me a year to get over that. So that was really something. Okay. So what I'd like to close with is by reading this. There were other women making flying history and setting records, but it was Amelia who captured the imagination and hearts of the public. Publicity made her a very important role model for women. Every time they stuck a mic in her face, she advanced the cause. She was the most famous woman of her generation, trying to be the first person to fly around the world when she disappeared without a trace. You can look at her flight in retrospect and see many things she could have done better, but that does not alter the fact that she had unusual courage and spirit. Amelia said, "Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be a challenge to others." She was aware of the dangers of her calling, yet so intent was she upon promoting aviation and of improving women's place in the world that she was willing to pay with her life for accomplishing her purpose. Thus will her life ever stand as a monument to glorious achievement by a woman who is not afraid to try. And remember her words, adventure is worthwhile in itself. So that's my tale. And if anyone has any questions about me personally or about the expedition.
I do, about your machete. Is that what gave you the tennis elbow? Whacking
Yes.
through the...
Yeah, just the continual whacking of
Oh,
the
gracious.
brush. Yeah.
So, Miss Jerry, did y'all find anything?
They have found things before on our expedition. I don't think we found anything. They had found, for example, and every time they found something, it was just encouraging because it was so, there is no such thing as a coincidence. They found a little cosmetic jar, a glass jar, had a lid on it, and they brought it home, and when they had it analyzed, it had freckle cream in it. And there, you know, who else in the world is going to be out there? Because she had freckles and was very self-conscious about them. So she would have had freckle cream. And they found a compact with some rouge in it, and they found a cigarette lighter circa 1935, and, you know, some different things.
Tell
Yes.
me, did they find a part of a shoe or?
They found the heel of a shoe, and it was a cat's paw heel, and it looked like the kind that we've seen her wear. She wore those, what do you call them, Oxfords, and with a kind of a stacked heel, and they sent it to the cat's paw factory, and they said, yes, that was manufactured in the mid-30s, And so, but it didn't have her name on it.
Right.
You know, so nothing would prove, you would have to find a part that had a serial number of the airplane on it or something like that.
Sure.
Or something with DNA on it. There was a skeleton found, but it got lost. So, and we do have, I have met a relative, a female relative of hers who carries the family DNA and lived in Atchison, Kansas for a while. And so that if we found anything that we could connect DNA to, we could compare it to hers.
But not a single piece of that airplane that young lady said she played on?
It could
Nothing.
have been covered up after 60 years of
Could have been.
storms.
We have a piece of aluminum that is of the right, it's a piece about this big and it has rivet holes in it. And they tried every way to match that up to a current Electra 10E and couldn't find, you know, thought maybe when they brought it back and repaired it from Hawaii, it was on the belly, wasn't anywhere. But when I showed you, she went across the country and stopped in Miami and had some work done. Someone, every time something is said about Amelia Earhart, someone in the country has something pertinent to it. And so they come out of the woodwork and get in touch with Tiger. And they had a picture on the front of the Miami newspaper that was a picture of her airplane that we had never seen before. Shows that she had a window in the back that she had covered with aluminum before she left Miami on this world trip. And it wasn't on any of the other pictures we had seen. So now they start analyzing this piece of metal we do have to that. And it, I mean, that would be like a fingerprint, you know, if it matches. And one of the most amazing things was they made so many advances in film, you know, photographs, that Rick decided to take all the photographs we have of the island and the ones we've taken and all, and send them to this guy that works with us so he can use his enhancement equipment on them and see if we've missed something. So he called Rick one day and he said, "Hey Rick, I'm looking at this photo of the Norwich City, and what is that thing sticking up out of the water over on the left?" And Rick says, "Well, I don't know." So Rick gets his photo out and he said, "I don't see it." Well, Rick had cropped his photograph. So all he had was the wreck of the Norwich City. And the other guy had the original and there was something sticking up out of the water. And when he enhanced it and brought it up, it appeared to be the landing gear of an airplane.
Wow.
So they send this off and sure enough, it looks like the exact thing that Amelia Earhart's wheels were connected to, you know, they connect the wheels to the airplane. Seems to be an exact match. It was a very unusual U-shaped thing. So, you know, just little things. But every time Tiger gets some publicity, will somebody find something else?
Now, that was just in the last few years, wasn't it, with the landing gear?
Yes, yes it was.
2-3 years?
Yes.
Do they still do excursions? Excursions, do they still do?
Yes, they do. I was on 4P, and then there was Expedition 4, and then they've had 5, 6, 7, 8. I know they've had 9. So they're still going out there. But Rick has written the definitive book, and coming out this summer, and we have solved the mystery of Amelia Earhart's disappearance, that she did indeed go down here, and he lays it all out, and so we feel like this is the answer.
So, Miss Jerry, they have this new thing that's come out in the last few years called LiDAR, where they scan over it and it takes all the foliage off and you can see everything under it. It's how they found Mayan temples.
Yeah.
Have they done that to the
Really?
island?
Yeah.
I do not think so. You know, that's really expensive.
It is. It is. I was just curious. I mean,
No,
it's just
I've
so
not,
new.
I've not heard that mentioned, and I was not familiar with that technology.
But it strips all the foliage off and it shows you anything under the foliage, like an airplane shape or walls or structures or anything like that, and they use it a lot in Guatemala and
Yeah, Guatemala,
like that.
Belize, and,
to find the temples that are buried.
Yeah.
I was just curious if maybe that's something they're thinking about.
I'll ask Rick
What
about
is it called again?
LiDAR. It's like a, Jim, you probably know it, it's like a drone, and it's got a special camera on it that scans the landscape, and a special program that it's run through that removes all growth, all natural biological growth.
How do they do that?
I don't know how they do it, but it's amazing how they do a lot of programs on the History Channel. It's all the rage now.
Yeah, it measures volumes and it's very precise. They could go over a construction site with a lot of materials using LiDAR. They could tell you
It can
how
even,
many cubic yards or cubic meters.
it can even see underground some too, can it?
That's what I understand.
Under what?
Underground,
Underground.
so if it was covered up after all these years with the
Uh-huh.
storms and the dirt, that they could possibly see it with that.
Very interesting.
So that was the landing gear was determined to be
Mhm.
specifically landing gear. They did prove that? Because I wasn't sure.
Just from an enhanced photograph. Because the theory was that the airplane landed on the shelf
Yeah.
when the tide was out.
Right.
And it's just like a concrete runway, only there are all these pock marks. It is pretty rough, but if I were out of fuel and looking for a place to land, I would not hesitate to use that for a runway. But then when the tide comes in, comes in about 3 feet up, and as it would come and go, it would wash the airplane over. And they think that landing gear, that wheel got stuck in one of those holes, and it washed the airplane, broke off of it, and went over the edge, and the wheel was left there. But of course, it's gone now. Okay. Anybody else?
They could not have lived
Museum.
What?
Mention the museum in Atchison.
Oh, the Birthplace Museum, the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum in Atchison. It's up in the northeast corner of the state on the Missouri River. It's up on a big bluff. And that's where she was born, her grandmother and grandfather's home, and she grew up there. So it is the second biggest attraction in Kansas after the Wichita Zoo. So if you're ever up that way, you need to go.
Oh, cool.
So